Okay, so in this part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draw images in RPGWizard. So the difference between drawing images in RPGWizard and drawing other things such as shapes and text is that an image is considered as an external asset to the RPGWizard's engine. What does that mean? Well, that basically means you need to load the image into the engine before it can be used by the engine, because images are stored as separate files outside of the engine and inside your project instead. Whereas things like shapes and text are just things that the engine can handle itself. It doesn't need a reference image to draw. So for this part of the tutorial, I've just picked a random image from the Wizard's Tower project. It is the hero stance image. You can pick any image for this. So when you open an image, if you double click on an image in RPGWizard, so in the graphics folder you find like an image file, like a PNG, you double click on that and it will open this preview of it. And down here in the properties tab you'll see a reference, what is the width and the height, and this is in pixels. So that's useful if you're writing image drawing code in the wizard and you need to quickly know what the dimensions of an image are. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to draw this image, and I'm going to show you how to draw a part of this image too, so draw just a section of the image, and it's going to show you as well how you can draw a rotated version of the image. So I've gone ahead and I've created this blank program. I'm going to link this program that I create in the description too, so you have to worry about that. So the first thing, before we can draw an image, is we have to load the image into the engine. And an image is an asset. So there is a function in RPGWizard called load assets. And the purpose of that function is to load in assets such as images, audio, I think fonts, other programs into the engine before you use them in your code. So before you draw the image, you need to ensure that the image is actually loaded. So if you just type in RPG code .load assets, you'll see that there's a function here, and it's described as loads the requested assets into the engine. When all the assets have been loaded, the onload callback is invoked. So I'm not going to go too much detail in a minute on what a callback is, but all you need to know is that once the assets are loaded, it's going to call some code that we give it. So it's going to wait until the image is loaded, and then when it is loaded, it's going to call the code, the drawing code that we're going to give it. So I'm just going to double click on this, and it's going to kind of complete this. And you'll see there's two sections to it. There's an assets, and then there's onload. Now we haven't defined assets, and we haven't defined onload yet, so we're going to need to define assets first. So assets, you don't need to fully understand what I'm doing here. You just need to be able to pretty much just copy it. So I'm just going to define an assets, let's say object. It's a collection of the image assets I want to load. So I'm just going to define it here. So I'm just going to type let assets equal open curly brace, close curly brace, semicolon, because basically what I'm doing right now is I'm defining an object which describes the assets that I want to load. So inside of this assets object, I'm going to define a key called images, which is going to describe the images that we're going to give to the engine to load. I'm just going to type it in here, and you can actually provide it with multiple images to load. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just going to tell it the image that I want to load. So my image is under the graphics folder. So any images that you need to load into the engine need to be under the graphics folder in your project. So under graphics, I have a subfolder called drawing images, and inside that I have that hero stance image. So I have to tell the engine relative to the graphics folder, where is the image? So I have to tell it that it's in drawing images and give it the name of the image. So I type drawing images. And now when you're doing like a path, so when you need to tell the engine that it's in a folder, you need to use /. So it needs to be the slash going like that. And then you need to type the name of your image and then what kind of extent is it, what kind of image is it. So in this case it's PNG. So that's all you need to load a single image into the engine. So we define this object called assets. Now I'm using something called let here, which is this whole thing is a variable, and it's storing a piece of information that we're going to use in this program. So I'm not going to go huge into variables in this video, but basically in JavaScript there are two ways to define a variable. You're either going to see let or you're going to see var. So these two kind of keywords, let, var, pretty much mean the same thing. There's a slight difference, but you don't need to know much about it for this video. So I've defined assets here, and down here in RPG code load assets, I'm providing it assets. So whatever I put up here is now going to be passed in to load assets. And now I need to define this on load. Now I'm going to use something, I'm going to put a callback into this function. So a callback is a function that is going that you want to call after an operation has completed. So in this case, we want to call a piece of code, a function, which contains code after we've loaded these image assets. So to do that, I'm going to do this. Now there are a couple of ways to do this, but I'm just going to do it this way, which is putting the callback straight into the kind of function parameters, so in load assets. You can do this other ways, but for this video you don't need to know all those ways. So now inside here, call your drawing code. So basically any code that I put in between these two curly brackets or braces will run after this image has been loaded into the engine. Okay, so when it actually comes to drawing images in RPGWizard, there are kind of two functions. So the first one is just your standard draw image. So it's just RPG code, draw image. And you see that one, it just draws an image onto the canvas. If there's one specified, and if there's none, it just draws to the default canvas. So just the same as all the other drawing functions we've seen. And there's a few things you need to pass it. You need to give it the name of the file. So we need to give it the draw images hero stance. You need to tell it where on the screen in pixels you want it to draw, what's the width and height you want it to draw it in, and you can also give it a rotation, which is specified in radians. So if you need to convert between degrees and radians, there are plenty converters online. You can just Google it and you'll find one. If you don't want any rotation applied to it, you just set it to 0, which is what we're going to do here. And then a canvas, and we're not using custom canvases, so I'm not going to set that either. So I'm going to double click on that, and it's going to complete all the kind of placeholder stuff. And I'm going to copy this image here and paste it into the file name. Now you don't need to use this exact image that I'm using here. You can find any image on your computer and just use it for this example. But you do need to know the width and height of that image. So I'm just going to put it at 10x, 10y. And I need the width, which is 223 pixels. And I also need the height, which is 374. So take both of those. And I'm going to set the rotation to 0 for this. and I don't need the canvas ID. Okay, so when you call that function, it's going to draw an image. The engine is going to draw an image, but you're not going to see it until you call the render now function. Just like you would with shapes or text, you actually have to tell the engine that you are ready to show the image. So I'm just going to call RPGCode.render now. And I'm going to run this, and we're going to see the image at 1010. There you go. That's the basics of drawing an image. Okay, so there's a few other things we can do with it. I'm going to rotate it just to show you the rotation. I'm going to move it a bit. I'm going to move it to like 150, 150. And then I'm going to stick in a rotation of, so it's in radians. So if you're familiar with like pi, which is like 3.14 or something like that, we can just try something like, I don't know what this is in degrees, but I'm going to try 1.27. We're just basically going to see the image rotate. Yeah, so we get a rotation. So if you want to figure out how to do degrees, and in terms of where does it rotate from, that's actually important. So I'm going to set it back to 0. Where is the rotation point? So when it actually comes to drawing your image, it draws it from the top left. So this is where the image starts. So this is 150, 150. And then it draws the full image, the width, and then the height. So when you do a rotation with the image, it rotates around the central point of the image. It doesn't rotate around the top left corner. It actually rotates around the central point of the image. So if I do that again, let's set it to 1.57, which is, I think, 90 degrees or 180 degrees or something. You'll see that it rotated around the central point. It didn't rotate around the top left corner. It rotated around the central point of the image. So that's how you do a rotation on your image. So that's the basic draw image function in RPGWizard. There is another drawing function, and that is the draw image part function. So RPG code dot draw image part, I think. Sorry, I just need to, I've got a typo in my autocomplete, so draw image part. So if you type in draw image and then you find draw image part, you'll find that there's another function there, and the purpose of this function is it can draw part of an image. So we could draw just like the top part of this image, for example. We could draw like his head, but we don't need a separate image. We can use the same image and just draw part of the image. So I'm going to try that. I'm just going to try and draw his head, for example, his top half. So what I'm going to do is just going to draw image part, let that complete. It's a little bit longer because when it comes to draw image part, you need to specify the X and Y location in the image that you want to start drawing from. So let's say I want to start drawing from the top corner here. So that's my, what's called your source X and source Y. And you need to specify how much of the image, so how much width and height of the image from that point you want to draw. And then you also need to specify the destination X, Y, with height. So you can change a few things here. Firstly, you can take part of the image and draw part of that image, and then you can also specify where on the screen do you want to draw that image. So okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the name of the image because it's exactly the same image we're using. I'm going to set the source X on the image to 0, 0, which is the top left of the image. So I want to start drawing from the top left. I'm going to set the width to be the full width, 223. But I'm going to set the height to be like 150. Okay, so I'm taking the full width of the image from the top left corner, but I'm only taking like less than half of the height of the image. And I'm going to draw that at 10, 10. And I'm going to give it the same width. So I want to draw it at the same width and height. So 150. I don't want any rotation. And we're not drawn onto a custom canvas. So if you were to run that now, you won't see the second image. Oh, we actually do. I wasn't expecting that. I wonder if I actually need the render now at all for this drawing image. Let me just check. Okay, we do. Must just be how closely they are called. So it doesn't really matter in this case. I think because there's not much of a gap in between the call in terms of time, the render now function manages to render both of them because there's no there's very little delay between the call. Okay, so we'll just run that again with the render now at the end of the two. So you'll see I'm drawing two images, and this is the first command that I called, and this is the second one that I called, which is only drawing part of the image. And again, you can rotate that part of the image, so I can actually set the rotation on that part of the image. And it should draw a rotated, yeah, so then it draws a part of the image rotated. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to actually drawing images in RPGWizard. There's one thing I actually haven't covered, and I just want to quickly mention it, is you might be wondering, how do I clear the screen once I've drawn something to it? And there's a simple function for that. It's called rpgcode.clear canvas. And what that does is that clears the entire canvas or screen that you give it. So in our case, we're not using a canvas. So if you were to call clear canvas, I'll do this now. Basically what will happen is it will render the image and then immediately clear the image. So we won't see anything. Yeah, so it goes black. And then if I were to just comment that out and run this again, there it is. So there's one other small thing. If you're looking through the RPG code functions, you might see some old functions called set image and set image part. These are the old drawing image functions. You shouldn't use them anymore for new code. So if you're writing new stuff, use draw image part. Set image part, they're no longer being actively supported. They still work if you have code that used them, but you should now move to draw image and draw image part. And the big difference between those two functions is that they have rotation, whereas set image and set image part didn't have rotation. So that's just something to be aware of. That covers everything I'm going to talk about in this video. In the next video, we're actually going to look at creating the battle system. So we're going to take our first steps actually creating the background to our battle system and placing an enemy on the board, perhaps. But that's it for today.